Welcome everyone to another Small Grains for Brewing and Distilling Happy Hour. This week we have Dr. Maninder Singh of Michigan State University in the Cropping Systems Agronomy Lab. And he's going to be talking to us about management practices to maximize yield and quality in wheat and barley, and various agronomic techniques to maximize sustainability, climate adaptation, and resiliency on the farm. So it's all about news you can use if you're growing barley and wheat. So without further ado, Manny. One more thing. So if you have questions during the presentation, please do feel free to pop in and ask those and interact in real time, or you can drop them in the chat if you're more comfortable with that, and I can read them off. So please do speak up and interact with us. All right, now, Manny, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate your invite to be able to talk to this group and see what you guys think about the work we're starting to do on the barley side. But I thought again, I think to get going, I'll introduce what my lab does, right? So as Ryan mentioned, I run the Cropping Systems Agronomy Lab here at Michigan State, and we pretty much focus on grower challenges, right? The current and emerging issues that we can tackle uh, with the goal of improving not only the profitability of our cropping systems, but looking at long-term sustainability as well. And as you can see in this couple of pictures here, this is what I call my lab. It's out in the field rather than having a wet chemistry lab. And when I started, we were mostly focusing on corn and soybean being the dominant agronomic row crops, right? But recently, we have been looking at doing more research on small grains, winter wheat mostly, and now initiating some work on winter barley. And this is important from my perspective, right? As we all know that there are benefits of including small grains in our cropping systems. Not only from the economic perspective, right? That is that there is research that shows that adding that third crop on top of corn and soybean rotation does benefit in terms of improving yield with those other crops and making some money while you're doing it. Plus, there are those environmental benefits here, right? That these small grain crops does provide a lot of ecosystem services when the land might be fallow otherwise and might be prone to erosion, leaching losses, and other such issues. And having this diversity in the cropping system also benefits in terms of long-term soil health perspective that hopefully again can lead to improved cropping systems. Anyway, so just like any other row crop, as an agronomist, I look at multiple aspects in terms of integrated management of that crop. And typically, we look on the yield side of things, right? That how we can help growers make more bushels, so to speak, without increasing their input cost a whole lot, with the goal of improving the overall profitability, right? And you can see a bunch of bullet points here that we do work on or collaborate with the other folks here in our department. When it comes to winter barley, the game is a little bit different, right? As all of you know more than probably me even, that yield is not the only goal or even the main target. It's more about quality. And even though these crops, just looking at these pictures, look very similar, there are differences. We can use our knowledge of growing winter wheat as a starting point on the winter barley, but know that outside of the similar growth and development, there are differences, right? Winter hardiness is a big one. Winter survival, is that going to be there, right? That we are starting to look in our program. And then the quality component is there, which is a huge one that we might not be paying as much attention while we are looking at management for winter wheat. So again, a lot of research questions that we can answer within all of these bullet points. But the two specifically we will be talking today about will be the planting date and planting population, meaning seeding rates. What are the optimal planting times and what are the optimal seeding rates we ought to be using for winter barley? And we are doing a side-by-side study for both of these crops, so I can share some of that data quickly with you guys. Uh, but know that other components are very important here, right? Crop rotation, we already talked about the benefit of that. Variety selection is an important component, probably more so from the quality side in winter barley and some of these other management. In terms of the planting date, we always think about that, the Haitian fly free date, which is about the third week of September here in Michigan, and then around where MSU campus is, right, Lansing area, and then goes, a couple of days before and after that time as we go north and south. But again, we don't have some of those old pests that used to be the reason behind that, but it's still thrown around as a good general guideline. So we wanted to evaluate, what exactly is the optimal time. Again, not only from yield, but from quality perspective. So we did initiate this work in 2019 growing season, where you can see we had 5 different planting times going from pretty much that mid-September timeline, about 2 weeks interval towards even mid of November. So pretty much pushing it on the either the two extremes, right? And in terms of seeding rates, we went again pretty low, less than 1 million seeds per acre, all the way to 2.4 million seeds per acre. So it was a split plot design with 5 planting dates, 5 seeding rates, and 4 applications. Gives us about 100 plots. And we actually did do that both in winter wheat and winter barley. So here in this picture, in the foreground is my winter wheat whitetail variety. The work that is being led by Dennis Pennington over here. And then in the background, you can see those are our barley plots. TP is the variety we are using about 30 units of N in fall, and then about 75 based on the work that Brooke and others have been doing at KBS. And you can see our 5 planting dates denoted by PD 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Another view of our plots just at the time of harvesting. So you can see again barley in the background, all those 5 planting dates. And our seeding rates are within these blocks. So let's say this within the PD1, our 4 seeding rates are 4 plots down there. And then other reps are to the left over here. And I will come back to this, but you can see the planting date 1 and 2. The plots are looking pretty decent. But as we start going into planting date 3, 4, and 5, you can starting to notice some gaps in here. So we had an issue with the low germ on the seed we had in that first year, as well as some winter kill potentially that year. If you look at the plots in the foreground, we did not have that issue on wheat side of things, and they all looked pretty good. I would say our first 3 planting dates were able to germinate and started growing before winter time. PD4 and PD5 did not, at least they were just poking through, but not really immersed before winter time. And that was about the same for both wheat and barley, actually. Looking at some of our data, so I threw a couple of wheat slides here to get us going. So here I have my yield on y-axis, my 5 different planting dates on x-axis. So going from that mid-September all the way to mid-November time. And 5 different colors are my 5 different seeding rates going from low to high. And as you can see, first, if we look at the planting time, we did lose yield as planting was delayed, and that is expected. The magnitude of it wasn't as severe as we typically expect, actually. In terms of seeding rates, we did find that there was essentially no interaction between seeding rate and planting date. So meaning as the planting was delayed, we did not really benefit by pushing that seeding rate to a higher number. That is what we typically recommend. But again, this is just 1 year, one location data. And we are repeating these trials this year to know more about these responses. But overall, we have done some other seeding rate work in winter wheat, and we feel like that sweet spot is around that a million to million and a quarter, somewhere in there. So we did see that, and surprisingly, even for those late planting conditions. To a couple of more graphs here. So these two graphs shows you a daily decline in yield you would expect. So that's what I have on my x-axis. These are Julian days, but as a reference, I put these dates right in the middle. The one I want you to look at is the one probably in the bottom. That's the yield decline, bushels per acre per day. So you can see starting from that mid September, we were losing about half bushel per day with the delay, and that number does get smaller. So it's the number that's typically being used is about a bushel starting early October. So it was less than that, about half to three quarters, but that number was getting smaller as you are getting behind, right, as expected. Uh, and again, those numbers were consistent with the what is being reported, but the magnitude was smaller. So that's all winter wheat. All right, keep this in mind as we look at this next slide, which the data I would say wasn't ideal, but this is what we got, and mainly driven by some of the poor stand we had in our winter barley. Same again figure, different planting dates on x-axis and then differing seeding rates in different color lines here. I was pretty surprised by the numbers we saw with the early planting with that mid-September. But as our planting got delayed, look at the magnitude of yield decline we are seeing here, much higher than what we saw with the winter wheat. And I believe our low stand did play a role. I did put some numbers down here. For first planting date, our stand was about 70% at the final harvest. For planting date 2 and 3, it was still it was around 50%. So it wasn't too bad, but again, much lower than what we expected. Planting date 4th and 5th were again did not emerge before winter time, and the potential you can see it was barely anything there. So again, some of this is driven by those poor stands, but again, the relative magnitude of numbers is much different than what we were seeing in winter wheat. So in 2019, when this was planted, if the planting got delayed because of delayed soybean harvest or some of the winter weather we had at that time, your potential would be lower if you were planting in this mid to late October window. In terms of seeding rate here, so compared to again wheat, we saw much higher seeding rates, and that probably was because of the low germ in our in the seed we used. So data from this year will give us more ideas about where the optimum seeding rate might be lying. But based on this data, it's anything below 2 million seeds, we did lose yield. In terms of, again, same graph, those daily declines, you can see this, the one at the bottom, you can see the magnitude of these numbers on y-axis, much higher than what we saw with the winter wheat, that the magnitude of decline, the daily decline was much higher. So what this data is telling me is that the ideal time to plant winter barley is that early window before mid-October. If we were in mid-October, then the yield potential was lower. But again, we'll be harvesting plots this year and see how that data looks like. Also put some quality numbers here that I just got back here a couple of weeks ago. So without being the expert on this, I'm gonna try do my best explaining some of this, and then hopefully I'll lean on Ryan and others to maybe help us learn more about this. So same 5 planting dates here, going from the PD1, 19th September to 15th of November, all right? And this data is across 3 of our highest seeding rates. The lower 2 seeding rates, 0.8 and 1.2 million, did not even give us enough of a good sample to run a quality analysis. So I did not use that data. Here you can see if we start with protein, again, I put some of the criteria based on what we are looking in the malting barley, right? With the delay in planting, you can see the protein content just jumped quite a bit. The first two planting dates were at least closer to that. The first one was the only one below 12%. The second one is right borderline, but the next three, including that mid-October planting, is much higher, and actually quite a jump compared to the first planting. So I was surprised by these numbers, and we'll see how this year is going to hold. In terms of plump kernels, that's where the first planting was at a disadvantage. So probably that early planting, a higher yield potential, did lead to some of the losses there. In terms of thin kernels, all of them were below the threshold of 3%. And I did look at the germination data, and that's where, again, the first two plantings did stood out in terms of staying above that threshold. But the mid-October and later on plantings did see a decline below that level. I also looked at the data on pre-harvest sprout, and only fifth, this last planting date was the one where it was below 120 units, and that seems to be the concern. So again, on top of that lower yield, the quality parameter seems to decline with the delay in planting, except the kernel plump seems to be the only one being impacted negatively with the early planting. We did look at the dawn data as well, vomitoxin, and the last year was ideal, at least if I was a grower, right? As a researcher, we want to see some differences, maybe some disease, but it was at a very, very low level. So this was all first year 2019 data. So this is a picture that I took from this year's trial. So this was planted in 2020 planting season, right? So this is the second year of our trials. And you can see the same 5 planting dates here, pretty close to what we did in the first year, except we were able to get a little bit earlier with the second planting date compared to early October in the first year. You can see planting date 1 here, way ahead of everything. I took these pictures back in November, and I did do some canopy readings, which tells you percent canopy in ground. And we were almost 75% coverage in planting it first, compared to 25% in second and only 8% in the third. And you can see these individual plants here in terms of their advancement, right? Number of tillers and number of extra leaves that the first planting date has. Even in the second planting date, you can see good growth, and the third one is just barely coming out, and the fourth one was not even emerged. And I believe we just planted the fifth one that same day, I believe. And this is a picture that I just took here a couple of weeks ago. Those same plots. On the left side is our barley plots, and on the right side is actually our winter wheat plots. I'm seeing a lot of yellowing in our early planted plots here. You can see the planting date 1 being yellowed here, right? So I don't think that's a winter kill. We have had a mild winter, so we'll see. I'm supposed to go back this weekend and look how these plants are doing. I assume that they will come out of this injury and start growing here sometime soon. We just applied our nitrogen here as well, so hopefully that'll help. But you can see I didn't see that damage in the second or third. So this will tell us if there's such a thing as planting maybe too early as well, right? Because remember, the second planting date was still in September, end of September. So that'll give us a good comparison this year. And you can see on the wheat side of things, we did not see any damage. So we'll have this data from second year this July, and we'll be happy to share with you all. That was the first component I wanted to cover. I believe, unless there are any questions, Ryan, I'll probably keep going and talk about 2 other components that I thought the group might be interested in. The first, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was gonna say there's no questions so far,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I do have a comment about the kernel plumpness on the early planted last year. I don't really have an explanation for that. It seems kind of anomalous to me. Vince, teepee is the variety that was planted. So it doesn't seem like September 19 is all that early to explain such a drastic difference in kernel plumpness there.
I had a question, the same exact question. I wanted to know, are these like averages of the different seed rates that you have here?
Yeah. So yeah, I need to, yeah.
What happens if you look at the plump kernels for the lower seed rates on the early planting? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I don't remember the number on top of my head. There was no interaction with the seeding rate. All right, so meaning that
got it. Yeah,
the
I get it.
numbers were similar across all three rates, but the magnitude might be different, right? And that might be getting closer to your threshold of 90. But that is a good point, and I will try to separate this data by seeding rates as well, and look at actual p values, even though they were not significant, but they are. If they are anywhere between below 0.242 or 25, that gives me something.
Sure.
But yeah, to me, we have seen on the winter wheat, and that's on the, I don't know how plumpness relates to the 1,000 kernel weight. We have seen that if you push to a higher yield potential, if you have more plants in that area and you're getting more yield by getting more number of kernels, you are going to get compensated in terms of a smaller seed weight. And I don't know if that will relate directly to plumpness, but we can look at that data and see if there are any correlations there. But a good comment, and let's loop back into that. All right, let's see.
Oh, hey, I got a comment also on that. On that teepee seed, somebody gave you some pretty awful seed. I just got to say, I think that was like what 60% germination ish.
Yeah.
But I also believe that it was even worse than that, and I think your data is suggesting that it was also very water sensitive or dormant, and that might explain why you had we saw problems in the later planting dates with stand. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up with winter barley. To me, it seems obvious that in planting rate, you have to take into account germination for winter barley, especially if you're going to turn around and plant it the same year that it comes off the field, because some of it is only going to germinate 20% at that point in time.
Yeah, that's a good comment, and I'm glad you brought it up. So this year again, we did learn from the first year, and this year we did run a germ test on the seed, and we did compensate for that number. It was pretty. I don't recall the number. I believe it was around 80 to 85%. I think somewhere in there. So that's a good rule of thumb to run a germ test either in-house or go with a lab that and then try to account for that number, especially if the planting is delayed, because it will become even more critical, as was the case for what we saw in 2019.
Yeah,
in the second year plots, we are not seeing that everything is looking good. Even again, we don't know how the fourth and fifth planting is going to show up, because it's not even immersed at this point. But that'll be an interesting observation how that will look like compared to what happened in the first year. But that's an important aspect in terms of keeping what to do with that seed before you plant for the seeding rate implications. So that's a very good comment, Vince. All right, moving on. So again, we have been talking about how these crops fit in a crop rotation too, right? There is a benefit there, both economic and environmental. And to get to these high yield potentials, as we are seeing, optimal planting time is going to be critical. So typically, a small grain is going to follow a soybean in that rotation, right? So I think there is some consequences there in terms of maturity selection, and even coming back after a harvest of small grain crop with what we call a double crop soybean system, right? So I don't think we'll have a whole lot of time today, so I'm going to quickly give, I think, some ideas here based on a lot of work we have done on the soybean sites. But yeah, maybe that will initiate like some thought processes and some other conversations. Here, what I'm showing is work we have done across multiple planting dates on the x-axis, and my y-axis is the maturity group for a soybean, going all the way from 1.0 to a 3.5. Just as a reference point, in our area, 2.5 is a typical or a recommended maturity. These different colors designate different yield potentials. All I'm trying to show you today is like if you look towards this later window, this end of June, that's where, or first week of July, that's where a double crop soybean will occur. You can see we are not seeing any benefit of pushing to a longer bean here, a late maturing bean. So there is a benefit of going to a early maturing bean if double crop is part of the rotation. And as you can see, if you don't do that, what happens is that those beans get frosted, and you will lose not only on the yield, but also on the quality. So this is on the back end, and there are implications with these early plantings. If you are thinking about soybeans ahead of a small grain crop, you will lose yield, as you can see from these colors, if you push to a early maturing variety. But again, that's where it has to be balanced out. You know, if you want to maintain a high yield potential and quality, we probably need to know that and do some math there to see which way you're going to come out on the as a winner, right? A lot of data here, but I think the only aspect I will show here is that with these late soybean plantings, what happens is they come off the ground very quickly. So they're only spending 3 to 4 days in ground compared to if you plant them early, they spend a longer time. But then they go through their phenological development very quickly. So again, it's a short window, and that's where a crop like winter barley, if you're able to plant it 7 to 10 days ahead of a soybean after winter barley compared to soybean after winter wheat, you can benefit from that perspective. So having a winter barley in this rotation compared to a winter wheat might be beneficial in terms of making this phenological development and getting to that R7 growth stage where you are not going to see a yield loss even if you get frosted, because soybean yield is already determined by that time. So the first important aspect with these double cropping systems is keeping with that early maturing beans, right? The second one we see is the seeding rate component. Here again, I'm showing you data from multiple planting dates going from April all the way to end of June for soybeans. And just pay attention for that end of June planting. And these different charts show the black one shows you where you get maximum soybean yield. The other tells you where you are seeing a maximum economic return. And see how these numbers compare to these early plantings, that they are higher, they are closer to that 150K, but there's a big gap between what gives you maximum yield versus maximum economics, accounting for the seed cost. So keep this in mind while thinking about these double cropping systems after a winter wheat or winter barley crop, that you're going to benefit by going to an early maturing variety and then going to a higher seeding rate without pushing it too far, where you are losing it on the economics without making too many extra bushels, right? The third component I want to talk here, I think quickly, maybe just give you, I think, some food for thought, is we are doing some work in terms of seed placement in these small grain crops, right? Again, with the idea of, you know, if we want these in our rotations, how we can push them to a higher yield potential. And the technology we use in small grain crops, these drills, it's not precise technology, right? It doesn't give us ideal seed placement compared to these more precision planters that we use in a high cash crop like corn and soybean, where you get that optimal seed to seed placement as well as seeding depth. So you can see this right is your more precision planting, and this left is what you can potentially get out of a seed drill. So we're asking the question, will this uniform seed placement benefit a small grain grower, right? And again, we're doing a lot of work here, but what just a couple of slides here, what we are seeing is that if we use a planter, we definitely get more uniform seed to seed seeding depth actually. So you can see all of these seedlings in the bottom picture compared to the ones from drill in the top picture. So we are seeing that uniformity, and it's leading to more uniform canopy development, and that will have consequences in terms of not only improving your yield potential, but even the quality of it, right? One thing we are seeing is the dawn levels. At least in 2 out of our 4 site years doing this research, again on winter wheat, we saw that when we used a planter, we saw almost a 30% reduction in our dawn level. And that we believe is because we are getting more uniform canopy with that precision planted crop, and it's leading to more uniform tiller development. So when you are using that fungicide application at the flowering time, you are hitting most of those heads at that right stage, and it's giving you a better control, leading to a potential reduction in these negative quality aspects. So something to keep in mind as we start thinking more about improving not only yield but quality in the small grain crops. We are also looking at some row spacing work. So all of the work I have been presenting is 7.5-inch row spacing. So with the planter, you can go to a narrow or you can go to a wider row spacing. So again, we are seeing benefits of going to a narrow row spacing. So you can see our 7.5 is over here, about 100 bushels, and we are able to gain 10 bushels by going to a narrow row spacing. On the other side, if we go to a wider row spacing, we do lose yield. Some growers have these planters right now where they can go and plant in 10 or 15 inches. But there is a potential of a loss in yield compared to that standard 7.5, and a benefit pushing to those narrow rows. How that will impact malting barley quality, that we still don't know, and probably need to look more into that aspect. That was my last slide. And if you guys want more information, including these slides, go check it out on our website, which is agronomy.msu.edu. And we have an extension tab in there, and that's where you will find most of our information.
Awesome. Thank you, Manny. We do have a question in the chat from Tom. He wants to know if you could summarize or conclude what would you say is the best planting date and seeding rate to get the best bang for the buck, so to speak, for winter barley?
For winter barley, so right now we only have 1 year of data under our belt, right? So I want to be careful making general recommendations, but based on what I have seen, including my counterpart Laura Lindsay at Ohio State, she has done some work in terms of planting date. I believe earlier is going to be the way to go. As of now, I'm thinking before mid-October is going to be the way. Definitely not end of October or November. You know, again, winter survival is a concern for barley for us, right? And the last 2 winters have been mild, so I don't think we have seen a lot of loss just from that. But again, early planting, I hope will benefit with that. If there is such a thing as too early planting, I do not know the answer to that. So you saw that reduction in plumpness in our first year early planting. We'll see what the second year look like from that perspective. As of now, I would say end of September to early October is the ideal planting time. In terms of seeding rate, that's a little bit more tricky, and the reason is it's environmental dependent too, right? How the weather in fall and spring is gonna look like is going to determine that aspect. So I believe we need more research looking at that aspect. As of now, I would say a minimum of 1.5 million seeds, if not higher, to maintain a good stand coming into springtime, right? I feel like at least that's where we need to be. In terms of winter wheat, we are finding that you can go lower. You can get closer to a million, maybe a million 1.2. But for winter barley, I feel it's going to be between 1.5 to 2 million at this point. Again, in that optimal window, I feel like it can be closer to 1.5 million. We'll know again more once we get data from this year where we have optimal plant stand. As planting window gets delayed, it's a different question. Hopefully we don't go there, right? But if that's the case, end of October, early November, I think you have to push it beyond 2 million then.
And again, depending on actual seed viability, determined by germination testing, which
yeah. That's as Vince and I were talking before, that's a lesson we learned the hard way, even in our research, right? That is very, very critical for a crop like winter barley. So yeah, running that germ test upfront is going to be important. When I talk about seeding rate, I'm assuming, again, thinking more from corn and soybean perspective, that you are at 90-95% emergence germination, and that is not going to be the case here, right? So I think accounting for that and actually going with seeds per acre rather than pounds per acre. I think that's another important aspect there, that in terms of seeding rates, let's not go with the weight basis, because there's going to be a lot of variation in the seed weight, right? And varieties are going to vary a lot, and there's going to be year to year variation. So we do recommend going by seeds per acre number and accounting for that any issues with the germ there, and that makes life easy if you're going by the count rather than by the weight, right?
yeah, absolutely. And it makes a good case for seed certification agencies like Michigan Crop Improvement and Ohio Certified Seeds. So yeah, when you buy a unit of seed from those agencies, you get a tag on it and it's been tested. And if anything goes wrong, well, you can make your case to them.
Yep.
There's another question from Larry, who is wondering if you've done any work on conventional tillage versus no-till in malting barley, and probably more likely in wheat if you have.
Yeah, so we haven't until now, but yeah, this last year we did put some trials. So the idea was, again, I think these couple of last slides I was showing you comparing our planter versus drill, right? So this was all done under conventional tillage system, but we learned from quite a few growers that there was this new approach where people were broadcasting winter wheat seed. So using like the equipment they will have to use with your cover crops, right? That you are cultivating and then you are broadcasting. So you're using a tillage tool and then some sort of broadcaster. So that got us thinking about, what are other systems out there. So this past year, we put in some trials looking beyond a simple comparison of drill versus planter. So we have comparisons looking at even, I believe, a no-till system in there. So just using a no-till drill and then using our planter with tillage, comparing against that broadcast incorporation is what we are calling. You're not simply broadcasting on the ground, you're incorporating by tillage. So we have those 3-4 way comparisons trials that were planted last year. So we'll have that data coming out this July here. Yep.
Very cool. All right, we have any other questions from any of the attendees? Well, in the meantime, so I was stalking on the internet and I saw that you grew up on a farm, actually. I was just curious, what kind of crops did your family grow when you were growing up?
So yeah, I grew up on a small farm in northern India in the state of Punjab. It's known as a epicenter of green revolution back in the days, 60s. And it's all about wheat and rice. So those were the two main crops as part of green revolution in Indian subcontinent, right? So I have like I would say a soft spot for wheat, winter wheat, so to speak, because that's what I grew up around. But it's a pretty intensive system. So you get two crops on an annual basis. The latitude was around, I think where Atlanta is in US, right? So you can get two crops, but yeah, the dominant crop was winter wheat. And I think most of it was actually the actual winter wheat. We do have like some facultative wheat so that you can plant in spring if you are unable to get in ground in the winter time, but mostly winter wheat.
So winter wheat that actually needed vernalization.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a couple of again varieties that those are facultative varieties, right? Meaning that they would not need vernalization. You can plant them in spring and they will flower. I don't know if we have any varieties here that are popular that can do that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I need to check on that.
Mark Sorrells at Cornell is interested in a line that he's working with, and it's barley, but it is facultative.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Interesting stuff. Just for that added adaptability on farm.
Yep. Yep.
Another question. Oh, a couple more questions. So Larry actually wants to know if you've done anything with hard winter wheat in Michigan. I know that's not a common thing here.
Nope. Yeah. Again, yeah, most of the work I was doing was pretty much on corn and soybean. And I have been in Michigan now for 4.5 years, something like that. And I would say the first 2 years were all about corn and soybean. But then again, as we were talking, we need to look at this diversity of crops, and that's where we're diving more into the small grains and looking more, again, starting with winter wheat, with the market classes that are popular in Michigan. So yeah, we have not done anything on the hard wheat side of things as of now.
Gotcha. The other comment was just from Ned that he wasn't aware of any markets for hard wheat in Michigan, but if we don't grow it, probably not going to be a market for it.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just talking a couple of days ago. We're trying to set up a rotation, which is very diverse, and we were putting canola in there. And I didn't know if canola would grow well, again. And the reason I was given people don't grow it, growers don't use it over here is we don't have a market. But folks who do, it does very well, I was told. So yeah, sometime it's, a catch-22, if you don't have a market, nothing you can do about it, but doesn't mean that you can't do it, right? And maybe if you do it, then the market will follow, but you never know. So
well, that's why we're here.
Yep.
Yeah, Larry just pointed out that small bakeries could use sprouted hard wheat flour for lower gluten baked goods, which is interesting. Yeah. Well, cool.
Yeah, maybe one of these days we can give it a try. We're always looking for, new things, new avenues to explore. So yeah, if any of you have any other comments, suggestions for us, you can see my information up here. So shoot me an email, give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you.
This is Ned Berkey. All of our wheat in Southeast Michigan, soft red primarily or soft white, goes to Chelsea Milling Company in Chelsea, which you know as Jiffy Mix, and goes down to Toledo, Ohio to Nabisco. They process 6 million pounds of wheat a day that goes to 12 bakeries in the eastern U.S. So those two take 99% of our wheat that I'm aware of in Southeast.
Oh, wow.
Can you tell me what it is they like about the hard wheat?
The soft wheat that we're growing here, or that what small?
No, there was a question about hard wheat. If there was any information on hard wheat, because somebody was saying that the bakers were using hard wheat.
Yeah, that's Larry Judge. My baker buddies tell me that they just can't use soft wheat for making good breads. So they need hard, but hard just doesn't do well in Michigan as far as agronomically. But it can be grown. I actually have found a guy that I just talked to today that has done some organic hard red winter wheat. But he said it doesn't yield very good, but he's been able to grow it.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any Michigan data on that. Anybody knows? Dean, Ned, you guys are aware if anybody has tried that?
I'm not aware of any hard wheat studies in Michigan the last 30 years I've been here.
No, I'm not either.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can try it one of these days and see how it goes.
I don't know what the agronomic issue is with it. that's beyond me, but I guess it just doesn't do well here for some reason, but I don't know what the factors are that surround that.
So Jeff's speculating that perhaps back to winter barley and early planting dates. He's speculating that perhaps too early a planting of winter barley mid to late September could cause seedling stress. So less rain, higher temps in the fall, and then leading to greater rates of winter kill if the winter is not mild. I think this past winter is the only time we haven't had that hard freeze, then January thaw, then freeze again. We just kind of had a mild all the way through.
Oh, that's a good comment, and that's why we are trying to push on the early side. We are trying to plant, mid-September and see, is there such a thing as too early planting, right? And this year we might be able to test that hypothesis, even if we had a mild winter. That wheat is looking pretty, as I showed in that picture. It's not looking pretty. So we'll see, even in a mild winter, what are the consequences of getting that extra growth. It was really, I mean, even in mid-November, it was just, I think, going gangbusters. So we'll see. And that's again one of the reasons we try to stay with that 7 to 10 days after Haitian fly free date. That if you push it too early, you can get too much growth, and that can have negative impacts in terms of winter survivability. So that's a very, very, very good comment.
Yeah, I think Dean might corroborate this too, that at spring green up or right before, barley always looks pretty rough compared to wheat, especially when they're next to each other.
Yeah, I would say, but it seems to come out of it pretty good. It just looks a little more rugged to begin with, but sometimes I think that part of that's because we have all those different varieties in our plots, so you can see a lot of differences. I'm not sure on a whole field of wheat compared to a whole field of barley that it would be quite as dramatic. I don't know.
Yep. And we are seeing, I mean, most of that was only in the first planting date. The second one did not show anything close to what the first is showing. So I'll be curious to see, what are the consequences of that. That is that second planting is gonna probably get ahead of even the first one, because it's just sitting there trying to recover all of that canopy. So again, that goes back to that comment about too early planting too, right? So again, I think this July will probably have some of these answers with a little bit more data.
I've seemed to notice that it seems like barley starts green up a little earlier than wheat. Have you noticed that?
Huh.
I don't know, maybe that's just my perception but in the past, I mean, I haven't looked, I don't have anything other than kind of observational stuff from around KBS, but it just kind of seemed to me that the barley might have, started getting that hint of green in it a little earlier than wheat, but
yeah,
I
guess so.
I have nothing to back that statement up with other than.
I'll get you more information after this weekend. I'll be walking those plots, and we actually on Monday we're going to be doing some tiller count data. So I'll keep a close eye on that and see if there are differences there. That's a good observation, Dean.
Do we anticipate that the tillering is going to be similar to things that affect tillering are going to be similar to wheat, or, I mean, that would be my,
I would think so.
My gut, but I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I think growth and development, phenological stages, it's pretty similar for these two crops. So I wouldn't expect them to be much different, but I guess we'll find out. I would think there's going to be more varietal differences there rather than even differences between wheat and barley, right? So.
So are you using TP? I'm sorry if I missed it, but are you using TP again this year as well?
Yep.
Good deal.
Yeah, so we only have one variety, right? And again, one component we look in our research is these G by E by M interactions,
Mhm.
and these management that we are recommending are going to dependent on the environment we see, which is not in our control. But then the genotype, the cultivar is, and I mean, you want to do more, but yeah, there's only so much you can do. So yeah, we talked to a couple of folks, including Vince, I believe, and settled on this variety. At least to get going, right? Eventually, if we see something interesting, we'll try to include like a second or third cultivar in there to look at those interactions, which of course are there, right?
Yeah, TP has a lot of promise in Michigan, from what we've seen thus far. And we had a lot of hope for Calypso because of its extended dormancy, but it's one of those, it's kind of a catch-22 in that way. And from what I've heard from maltsters working with it in the malt house, it isn't necessarily easy to malt the coax those enzymes out of it. So the search continues.
Dean or Manny, I asked Brooke this last week how much nitrogen I should put on my TP barley this spring. What do you guys recommend? Brooke suggested 75 pounds of nitrogen.
That's what I would say too. I'm still trying to confirm the number we had in the first year in our plots. If you remember those protein numbers I was showing you, except that first planting, and even, I mean, second one was okay, but the other ones were, I mean, in 15 and 16s. So we were wondering that if we ended up applying 90 instead of 75, because these plots were side by side, wheat and barley, and we applied 90 to wheat. But this year we made sure that we are applying only 75 because we saw those high protein levels this year. So I would definitely say just one. Don't do a split, just do one application at green up of 75 pounds.
Yeah, I
Dane,
think from the work that we've done, we've kind of honed in on the 75. I think we did 90 or 100 as well and ran into protein issues, and 50 is just not quite enough. So I think that's a good target number.
Okay, thank you.
Manny, going back to that planter versus drill stuff, I'm guessing at that seedling stage that you showed there, it's probably the depth control on the planter more than the spacing that's giving that uniformity. I'm sure the spacing is going to help later in the growing season, but I'm guessing it's the depth control is where you really gained using that planter over the drill.
Yep, you're spot on that. I didn't show all the data. We did look at multiple plants within a given plot to look at coefficient of variability, and we gained a lot in terms of seeding depth. I think we reduced it by like more than 50%, that variability. In terms of seed to seed spacing, we did improve, but it was minimal. We did do better than the drill, but I think that the technology is still not out there where you can singulate at that high of a seeding rate. Our goal was, again, for the seed to seed spacing to work, you need to have enough space between those seeds, right? If you're planting on top of each other anyways, it's not gonna matter, right? So that's why our goal is, get more linear feet per unit area, right? And the way to do that is, number one, you go with a narrow row spacing. And number two, you cut down on your seeding rate. Now you can get more seed to seed spacing. And I think our narrowest row and lowest seeding rate was about, I think, 2 inches apart. So that's where you can potentially see benefit of singulation. But again, the technology we were using, the RPMs we were, the disc was spinning, we didn't get much benefit out of seed to seed spacing. So our uniformity, you are right, is coming mostly, I would say, from that optimal seeding depth. And we are trying to learn more about how tillering occurs in small grains. We are doing actually a seeding depth study this year in winter wheat, where we planted at 4 different seeding depths and trying to correlate that to how it impacts number of tillers and uniformity of those tillers. But yeah, I feel like that's what I call so-called a low-hanging fruit. You know, if we want to improve seed placement, taking care of seeding depth will take us quite a ways in terms of, again, not only improving yield, but on the quality side of things too, as you guys saw with that down data. The singulation should help, but I believe we are not there yet.
All right, sorry, we had a chat about Calypso going on in the chat. Agronomics versus malt house performance. So Calypso, I think, is more favorable agronomically than Violetta, which is another Lima grain variety. But Violetta malts more easily. And we just need more data on Violetta to be able to say that it's not a good candidate, but we've seen more down accumulation in variety trials compared to Calypso and lower spring vigor. So yeah, unfortunately, it seems like we've, as far as spring barley goes, we've hit on a good candidate, LCS Odyssey, 3 to 4 years running now, but we haven't really found one that's been kind of a magic bullet in the way, or a potential magic bullet in the way Odyssey has been for winter two rows.
What's the yield potential you guys are seeing out of spring barley?
I think the top end of Odyssey is like around 70 bushels.
70, okay. So there's quite a difference then.
Oh yeah, yeah, and then more common on-farm yields are like 50 to 60.
Okay.
70s, yeah, you're doing
40s.
Yeah, 40.
Not Odyssey, sorry, but yeah, spring barley's tough. Except for Odyssey. Odyssey does well.
Well, here, yeah, in New York, Odyssey does terribly, I guess. So
well, it's too wet.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we got to figure out how to grow winter barley well then, right? And again, this is we are looking at some other interesting ideas, including like companion crops, you know, nuts crops and things like that. So we will see where this leads us. But yeah, pretty excited to, I think, get my hands wet on this side of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking for, again, feedback from you guys too, right? That can help us as we are designing our research. So I'll appreciate if I get any feedback from you guys, so we can refocus our plans accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Larry just dropped in here. Larry said, I had 5 last year that looked fantastic until a late storm knocked down all the primary heads, and the remainder had 14% protein and only 20 bushels per acre. What variety was that, Larry? Was that Calypso?
That was Calypso.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah, it looked fantastic until just before harvest. I think it was going to be really good. And I think maybe the protein wouldn't have been bad either, but every primary head was just flat in the dirt after a severe thunderstorm that was like a week before harvest.
Yikes. Well, yeah, dormancy didn't help you there. That's for darn sure.
I did malt some Calypso a couple years ago, grown by the Verizons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he had that a while, so I didn't have any dormancy issues. It did okay. It actually kind of ran out of gas for enzyme levels towards the end, but it wasn't too bad. But the Violetta I've got right now is way better. Way better enzymes, grows much nicer in germination, and yeah, way better enzymes than the Calypso had for sure.
Yeah, Violetta seems to do really well in Ohio and Indiana too. I just I wish it was showing itself to be a better candidate agronomically up here, but we'll see.
So what do you guys? What do you guys think where the market is going in terms of how many acres we'll expect people planting for the upcoming year? Anybody has any idea?
Yeah, it's not very many as far as barley
Not
goes,
much.
right? Let me pull up the production survey real
So
quick.
what's the holdback? I mean, is it on the, again, the market side of things, or is it people still learning about the agronomics of it, or what?
I think it's all market.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we looking at? Around 300 acres projected for mostly just winter barley in Michigan next year. There's not a whole lot of spring being planted anymore. So it's been trending steadily down. 2016, we had a high of around 2,000, and then it dropped down to around 500-ish. And it kind of held there for a few years, and now it's down to 300. But it's all demand pull, which is, you know, for the health of the market and all that, it's good. I don't want anybody growing any more than that there's a buyer for, really. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a little sad.
How about Ohio? Any idea how much is down there?
It's a good question. I don't know.
And are they trending up? I mean, my hope was that, yeah, that hopefully we're going to be trending up here with this talk about new malt houses coming in and grow local with the new generation, right? That we were talking earlier.
I was at a meeting in Fulton County, south of Lenawee, south of Adrian, a year and a half ago. And I thought they were talking like they wanted 50,000 acres for Ohio and Michigan.
Mhm.
Well, I know they talked about 50,000 acres, but I don't know what the time frame was and the varieties. They didn't go into any details of that.
Yeah, that was largely due to origin malt, and they were looking for growers to produce puffin for them. Not really sure where they're at anymore, but I don't know if puffin's performing where they want it to be right now. I haven't really been keeping close track of where they're at as far as building their production facility versus having barley contract malted for them. But yeah, that's likely what was going on down there. There's been a lot that, and then a big project here in Michigan in the works as far as building a larger scale malt house. But it's a big endeavor, and it's really research or resource intensive. So it's going to take a while to get up there. And then these smaller malt houses in Michigan, like the two biggest, only produce 100 tons per year, 100 short tons per year. So they're just not consuming a whole lot of barley. And if you're running a small malt house, you might only work with one or two growers and not have need for a lot of acreage of grain. So it's just, it takes a long time to bootstrap an industry from that level up, right?
Yeah, I think, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk of, wanting 10,000 acres of barley from Michigan, and I'm sure even more from Ohio. And that's kind of, I have not heard that kind of talk lately. So I'm kind of with Ryan. I'm not sure, where those projects are at, where their markets are at.
Yeah, hopefully it'll change here soon, right?
Yeah.
That's a goal there.
Yeah, we'll keep plugging along. It's a good thing barley's fun to work with. We've got we've got an entertaining plant and entertaining industry to work with.
Yep.
We've got that.
All
Yeah,
right,
when you're
guys,
trying to build the infrastructure as well, it's that sometimes that takes time.
Yep.
Mhm.
I probably better get going here. Any other comments, any feedback, questions for me? What else we should look into? All good?
Yeah, I think I'm all good. Thanks for being here today, Manny.
Sure, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks
And
for
then
having me.
contact info is on the slide. If anyone wants to get a hold of Manny, you can also contact me as well. I'm always available. So yeah, thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for a good conversation. It was the perfect kind of mellow afternoon conversation after getting a COVID shot for me.
I wish I had a beer in my hand. That's what I'm missing.